There's stories that when told, you immediately think it's made up. It's too incredible to be real, but I'll tell you a tale that is very real and very terrifying. I've grown up believing in ghosts. My parents have told me many of their outlandish stories about their ghostly experiences. As all kids wholly trust their parents, I took them as the truth. As I got older, I got more curious about their stories and asked more questions. Finally, I decided to write them out. Therefore, here is one of those stories. I'll tell the story from my mum's perspective, as that's how it was described to me. I was only 19 when I met my soulmate. His name is Kevin, and he was my brother's friend. I didn't think much of him in a romantic way at first, but one day he took me for a ride in his car, and I thought he was a nice guy. My interest was piqued. He came around one night looking for my brother, but he wasn't home. I could tell that he liked me right then, when, with a shy smile, he asked to come in and spend time with me. We started talking when suddenly his ex came barreling in and attacking me, thinking I was his girlfriend. I was shocked to my core, trying to wrap my mind around what was happening. Kevin managed to pull her off me and kick her out. Embarrassed, he left too. A few days later, he came to my work to apologise and admit that he liked me. He asked if he could kiss me there and then. I knew I was insane to get involved with a guy with so much baggage, but I gave it a shot. I was hooked and we were together from then on. It'd been a short while when he mentioned in passing that his parents' house was haunted. He had pranked me recently about a ghost with a chainsaw in the woods, so I of course thought he was bullshitting and laughed it off. I didn't know at the time that he was actually telling the truth. I remember the first time I saw the house. It had this creepy feeling that lingered around it, a darkness that permeated every surface. The house wasn't some old abandoned Scooby-Doo manor, it was a small, old, white weatherboard abode. Its windows weren't quite right, large dark voids peering out as if it was always watching. It rested on uncovered stilts, like spindly spider legs perched on the hill. Strangely, the door sat on the side of the house, not the front facing the street. Each step up the stairs letting out a loud creak as if warning you away. It was only 6 weeks later when Kevin declared that he loved me, and 6 months after that, he convinced me to move into his parents' house while they were on an extended holiday. I refused at first due to the house being old and having a pan toilet, which I considered to be disgusting. He insisted that living there would be cheaper and we'd be able to save more money for a house in the future. After much contemplation, I agreed, and we moved in a week later. It was a typical home during the day, but it was most active at night. Strange things happened from the start, things moving on their own, weird sounds and footsteps when no one else was home, and the feeling of being constantly watched inside the house. There was one room in particular where most of the activity originated. It was the smallest bedroom in the back of the house. When home alone, I'd occasionally hear the door to that room open, and what sounded like heavy footsteps wandering throughout the house. I immediately understood my boyfriend's apprehension, and like him, could only shrug it off and learn to live with the bizarreness. Within days of moving in, the first big paranormal event happened. We were sitting at the dining table eating dinner, talking about our day. It was nice and comfortable when suddenly, the chair across from us slid out from under the table, giving us quite a fright. Kevin and I stared at each other in shock. I asked him if he did that, and he swore to me that he didn't touch the chair. A year later, and after many harmless paranormal experiences, we agreed to get married, not long after the birth of our first child. I was never really afraid of whatever lived in the house. That was until this one morning, where everything changed. It began during the winter of 1992. A lot had happened in this town and house, mostly due to my husband's shitty family drama, and I was desperate to get out. I'd gotten somewhat used to the strange happenings. I still never liked it at night though. The constant creaking and intermittent footsteps sometimes drove me up the wall, but this was the first time I was actually afraid for my life, and that of our daughter. It was around 5 AM, and I'm in bed starting to doze off after sending my fiancée off to work and putting my daughter to sleep in the bassinet beside my bed. It's quiet this early in the morning. The faint glow from the street lamp outside peeking through my curtains only allows me to see outlines and shadows. I'm almost asleep when I hear a creak from inside the house. My eyes pop open and my heart begins to pound loudly. While I wait for my eyes to adjust to the dark, I listen intently. Nothing more follows, so I dismiss it as the normal sounds of an old house. I relax back into bed. A few seconds later, I hear a sudden loud crash that echoes throughout the room. With a gasp, I sit up, adrenaline surging through my body. It sounded like someone had charged at the wall like a bull and slamming their whole body into it. I tried to listen for any movement over the sound of my loudly beating heart. Nothing happens for a long time. Eventually, I started to rationalise to myself. It was probably something falling over or a car backfiring, or perhaps even the neighbours. After a bit more time, I laugh nervously and tell myself it must have been my imagination. I lie back down, the unsettling feeling still making me shudder as I try to go back to sleep. Not too long later, as I'm beginning to relax, it happens again. It's even louder this time. I feel the vibrations resounding from the walls and hear the tinkering of the objects on the cabinets crashing together. With a shout, I leap out of bed, grab my baby, close my bedroom door, and cower in my bed. I'm curled around my daughter, breaths coming in gasps as I try to calm my crying baby, who clearly senses my terror. I stay there, listening to the loud bangs that occur around every 15 minutes. I began to quietly hush my little girl while holding her tight, making sure the covers of my bed hide us from whatever could be there. It's difficult to breathe under the blankets, but I'm too frightened to lower them because I know something was out there, and it was anything but good. There are tears in my eyes, and I beg for my fiancée to come home so I won't be alone. Every crash makes my heart stutter in my chest, and I let out small whimpers in fear. I don't know what to do. My daughter's cries don't block out the sounds of what's outside my door. I wish I could call someone, but the phone is in the other room. My instinct tells me that the oppressive energy is at my door just mocking me. All I can do is close my eyes and wait for the sunrise. Finally, as the first rays of the sun hit the window, the sounds suddenly stop. Quiet descends on the house. My mind and body are exhausted. I uncurl from my fetal position, muscles protesting from holding the pose for so long. Slowly, I pull down the blanket from my body, squinting into the brightened room. My daughter wakes from a fitful sleep and begins to gurgle. I let out a deep breath as I feel that the heavy presence has left. I look down at the bundle in my arms with a small smile. It's over, for now. I told Kevin when he came home from work. He could easily tell I was distressed and tried to calm me down by suggesting it was just possums running across the roof. I insisted that it couldn't have been possums, unless they somehow got into the walls and grew large enough to create an impact of such power. He agreed that it was strange and that he was sorry that it happened to me. He'd grown up in this house and knew that anything could happen. I didn't hear the banging for a couple of weeks and had begun to put the experience behind me, or so I thought. It started as a routine morning. I kissed Kevin goodbye as he headed off to work and settled into bed to get an extra few hours of shut-eye after checking on my sleeping daughter. I'm zoning out, thoughts slowing as sleep pulls my eyelids down slowly. The house is quiet and I'm warm and comfortable in bed. It doesn't last long before I'm startled awake by the sound of loud creaking. It's like the whole house groans. My eyes snap open as I felt the air shift and a heavy presence settle on the house. I can feel goosebumps raise all over my body, and I shudder as the room temperature plummets. I sit up slowly, the sheets pillowing around my waist. I stare in dread at the wall on which the door to my room is located. Please, not again, I whisper to myself. I recoil in terror as the first thud impacts. It sounds like it's coming from within the wall, not outside it now that I'm listening for it. As like before, 15 minutes elapse when it happened again. The door is open, and all I see is darkness beyond the threshold. But I sense that I'm being watched from within, and it knows that it's now got my attention. I wrap my trembling hands around my body while shaking my head, wishing it would all stop. I'm tired of it, all of it. This fucked up house can go to hell. As the third bang rattles the wall, I finally snap and scream, "Leave me alone!" I'm exhausted from not sleeping well. I just burst into tears, sobs shaking my whole body. The stress is breaking me. I can't handle it. I keep crying, the large drops staining my sheets until I finally run out of tears. My throat is dry, and my breath stutters in my lungs when I try to inhale deeply to calm myself. Now I'm just left empty, slumped in my bed, surrounded by shadows. My mind is just blank now, so I don't even flinch at every insistent bang. In my desperation, I just start breathing out only 2 words: "Stop it. Stop it. Stop it." I only stir when my daughter starts wailing. I hastily wipe the moisture from my cheeks and slowly creep towards her bassinet, all the while keeping a wary eye on the doorway. I lift her head up and cradle her in my arms. Her cheeks are red from crying, and her little fingers clench around my shirt sleeve. Putting her on the mattress, I sprint to the door and slam it closed. I then crawl into bed with her, grabbing a tissue to wipe my face, and spend another morning waiting for sunrise to come. An hour later, I'm blinking blearily into the light as I watch the sunrise. Lifting my head slightly to look around my room, I groan as my head pounds from the emotional turmoil of earlier. I can feel that the entity is gone for now. Not completely though, just waiting in the background for its power to restore. I let out a heavy sigh, lifting my baby into my arms and getting ready for the day. All the while, mumbling obscenities under my breath. Now I'm just pissed. I know I'm a strong person, but this would wear down anyone. I believe that it drew power from our misery, by using the stress already caused by personal family problems, and piling on top of that, it becomes more powerful. I begged my fiancée not to leave most mornings, but I knew that we needed the money so that we could move out of this nightmare house. This occurred many times throughout my residency, about once or twice a month. It was terrifying, but there was nothing I could do. I felt powerless. I needed to protect my daughter, my sanity, and later on my second daughter. Although most of the time the entity was harmless, it was the times it was threatening that worried me. I don't know if it just wanted attention, or that it was actually out to scare me on these nights. I spent 2 long, stressful years in that house, and at the first opportunity, we got out of that place. I always hated it when the darkness crept in, and the ghost slithered out of the shadows. The events of this night are a distant memory now, but I've never become complacent enough to forget my experiences. What I permanently earned from the incident is a fear of the dark, fearing that which lurks beyond the shadows. We lived in our house for 18 years. It was a new build when we bought it. We live in a quiet neighbourhood in the foothills of North Carolina. Starting about in year 3 of living here, I would periodically see a black shadow go around the great room that's 15-foot ceiling at its peak at nights. I saw this shadow several times, but never mentioned it to anyone else in the family. The shadow always started in the same corner of the room and travelled around the perimeter of the walls, ending in the kitchen. It wasn't a reflection of cars or anything else, because the shadow did its thing if the blinds were open or closed, and if the curtains were open or drawn. We were having a family movie night several years ago, eating popcorn, laughing, and having a good night. My youngest son asked if we saw it as the shadow moved around the room as usual. He said he had seen the shadow many times and it scared him, which is why he stayed in his older brother's room a lot of nights. My oldest son chimed in that he sees it frequently. My wife added that she too has seen it. I couldn't believe it. All 4 of us had seen the shadow, but not a single one of us mentioned it. I didn't say anything because no one would believe me. Same for my wife. It just became a regular sighting in our house. 2 to 3 nights per week. The shadow still makes its round in our great room. I've tried several times over the years to get a video of the shadow, but it knows what I'm doing. Because when I'm ready, it doesn't show itself. Now it's just a regular thing that happens. We have had guests over before who saw it as well. There are no sounds, just the shadow, making its regular trek around the room.